The History of Peruvian Agriculture in Society, presented by Stephanie Bruley and Spencer Wood.
Agriculture has played a large role in Peru since early Andean civilization. We will explore the significance of agriculture throughout Peru's history since before the Incas, as well as to how its role in society has changed over time.
Peru's geography is very diverse. It includes extremely arid coastal deserts, dense rainforests in the Amazon, and treacherous mountains of the Andes, none of which are conducive for farming typically seen by ancient Afro-Eurasian societies. Ancient Andean civilizations had to overcome these obstacles in order to become agricultural societies. Terrace farming is the answer the Tiwanakus developed for the harsh terrains. Using stepped platforms, crops could be grown on mountainsides without the fear of being washed away. The terraces also allowed for irrigation of the crops due to gravity and Peru's frequent rainfalls. Terrace farming allowed the Tiwanakus to master farming and facilitate its integration into their lifestyles.
The integration of terrace farming is seen nowhere better than in the Incan Empire, where agriculture is synergistic with everyday life. Communities known as ayllus, which were comprised of communal farms, are commonplace throughout the empire. Community members work the same land to both sustain other community members and provide the necessary crops for the empire's taxation demands. Agriculture was so deeply intertwined into the Andean society that their patron goddess, Pachamama's daughters, represented their natural resources. For example, Soramama, Axamama, and Cocamama were named for maize, potatoes, and coca respectively. These Incan ways of life were turned upside down almost overnight in 1532 when the Spanish conquered the Incan Empire. The Spaniards brought with them the idea of privatization of land. This disrupted and ultimately destroyed the Ayllus communal lifestyle, as well as caused a decline in the relationship between Peruvians and agriculture.
Privatization of land led to the implementation of the institution known as haciendas or plantations. By the end of the 1600s and for the following century, a majority of Peru's agriculture is produced by these haciendas. A great divide is formed in socioeconomic status because of this. The already wealthy Creole hacienda owners are now becoming wealthier as the farmers become poorer and more impoverished. In the 1700s, during the economic decline of Spain, the Bourbon reforms are decreed and later enforced in South America. By the 1770s, agricultural reforms began to be enforced in the Viceroyalty of Peru. These reforms allowed Spain to acquire farmland and create monopolies to certain goods. The state-run monopolies shifted production from the more traditional goods to more modernized crops, such as cotton and tobacco, which were in high demand in Europe.
When Peru gained her independence from Spain, the only change to farmland was ownership. The land went from being owned by the wealthy Spaniards to the wealthy Creoles. The peasant farmers who had worked the land saw no differences in day-to-day life whatsoever.
Agricultural life stays similar until 1969, when the military government of Peru, in an attempt to revitalize Peru's economy, enforces the agrarian reforms. Like the Spanish Empire before them, the Peruvian government seizes all land with the exception of the communally owned peasant farms. This means, as a farm owner, if you did not work your own land, you would lose management and distribution rights, and your profit would be in the form of 20 to 30-year bonds. The primary idea was the government-run farms would give peasant farmers fair wages and working conditions that the hacienda owners were denying them. Government-run farms also allowed for a shift in crop production to goods that would sell better. The government reforms failed due to mishandling and corruption, which left thousands of farmers without work and increased problems with poverty throughout the country. In addition, the hacienda structure remained mostly intact, contrary to the goals of the reforms.
After the failed agrarian reforms, as well as the economic crash in 1980, Peru's government tried once again to revitalize their stagnant agriculture. The government offered interest-free loans to farmers in an attempt to increase agricultural GDP. But by this time, tensions had grown higher than ever between farmers and their government. They no longer trusted the stability and reliability of Peru's government, and did not want the possibility to be forced to change the types of crops they produced once again. Fewer farmers than desired took these loans, and many of them failed to repay their debts. The returns on the loan initiative were negligible and drained Peru's resources. The desired increase in agricultural GDP was never seen.
During the 1990s, Peru saw hundreds of laws passed to stimulate the agricultural sector. These included reprivatization of farmland, as well as construction of infrastructure, such as irrigation systems, to help improve farming. Tax incentives were also provided which successfully encouraged farmers to shift their crop production to those that would be more lucrative in the global market, such as cotton, coffee, yellow corn, and sugarcane. Peru launched into the international market and finally had a profitable growing agricultural sector. The newfound agricultural freedom and success led to an increase in production of all crops, including crops like the coca leaf. Coca is infamously known for its role in cocaine production, but also finds use in products such as teas and medicinal remedies. In an attempt to halt cocaine importation into their own countries and on a global scale, the UN, US, and European countries have put pressure on Peru to regulate and ultimately diminish coca production. Incentives from the US have also been put in place in attempts to convince farmers to switch to products like the coffee bean. Peru's government is complying with the international powers and implemented many reforms to stop the production of coca in their country.
Present-day Peru finds itself in high tension with farmers due to the implementation of these reforms. Peru is the second largest producer of coca leaves in the world and has a long-standing tradition of coca leaf farming. Peruvian farmers have become angered by the prospect of having to abandon these traditions. Trying to avoid farmers becoming militant, like those in Colombia, the Peruvian government has become lenient in enforcing the coca leaf reforms. Along with these reforms, an extremely high agricultural tax rate, recently reported at 18%, has led to instances of farmer riots. A large portion of Peru's farmers contribute to their informal economy, making them unable to be taxed properly by the Peruvian government. This means that the farmers capable of being taxed have to pay more to compensate for those that aren't. Peru's agriculture makes up of about 10% of its gross domestic product, but has a staggering 30% of its workforce employed in the sector. This implies an unstable disconnect between agricultural production and government taxation. Even so, Peru is a main supplier of many agricultural products seen around the world today. Currently, they are the largest supplier of quinoa, producing over half of the world's supply and contributing to many other common goods.
Though in the past 20 years there have been significant positive reforms to agriculture, agricultural policy may always be a sensitive and volatile subject due to the rich social significance that agriculture has played in Peruvian history, dating back to early Andean civilizations.